The Department of Environmental Conservation is moving right along with its review of hydraulic fracturing. However, it is not moving very quickly. Earlier this month, the DEC postponed a scheduled meeting of its hydrofracking advisory panel. And then after the panel did actually meet yesterday, DEC Commissioner Joe Martens said he's not certain whether the state will be able to start issuing permits next year at all. Of course, environmental advocates are thrilled. They are still hoping that the state decides against issuing permits, period. The potential environmental impact is just one of the issues that the advisory panel has been grappling with. Joining me now is one of the members of that panel. She is Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo. Assemblywoman, it is a pleasure to see you in the in-house. Thank you for being with us.
First time here.
So what happened last time around? Because we got all of a sudden this press release from the Enviros saying meetings off and it's because the state's not ready, and you know they were thrilled. So what's your understanding of it?
Well, you got to keep in mind who's on this panel. You know, I'm kind of impressed with the fact that everyone on the panel is very calm, reasonable. Everyone has studied this issue a lot and brings a certain expertise to the table. And when we've been grappling with state resources, local impacts, we've asked a lot of questions, we've asked for follow-ups. We're slowing up the process ourselves by virtue of the fact that we're trying to get it right. I think we're all really overwhelmed with the sense of responsibility that we not make a mistake here. And even the Chemung County executive, who presented his county's report on the planning work that they were doing, made that point very clear yesterday himself, that even though they've spent so much time and energy thinking about this, I want to make sure we get it right. At
some point, though, you have to pull the trigger either yay or nay, right? I mean, because interestingly, Dave Catalfamo was here last night, one of our insiders, and he made a point that I hadn't thought of, which was other states have the ability. I mean, we know Pennsylvania, of course, but there are other states that have natural gas drilling, and sooner or later, if New York delays, or puts up a process that is too much regulation, if you're for it or against it, regardless, it's just the train's going to pass the state by, basically. So there has to be a timeline here, right?
Understood, but I think New York is just at an interesting crossroads in the discussion of hydrofracking. Because of our long-standing history of environmental protection, I'm not surprised that New York is being so careful moving forward. And it's just one of those things. When you've got half the public for it, half the public against it, the legislature is equally split.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure to be in with a group of people who understands the severity of what we're talking about and the importance of it. Some people feel it will be an economic boom. Other people think it will be a disaster. And to just be able to say, okay, we're going to set aside all of those considerations and see if there's some way it can be done safely. But we're not pressed for time. And I think that was the big change that we got to yesterday. Don't worry about the budget right now. Let's make sure that we've made all of the proper considerations moving ahead.
And this is particularly personal for you because it's your area, your district that you represent that's like ground zero in this, is it not? I mean, we're talking about the central New York area.
Interestingly enough, I represent the urban core of Broome County.
Right.
So the majority of my constituents won't benefit necessarily from this drilling activity.
Okay.
Except for the town of Vestal, and I have an obligation to those landowners to represent them in this process as fairly as I possibly can. You probably know I'm a lifelong environmentalist, so my natural inclination is to be very, very skeptical about anything on this level, the scale of industrial activity. But, you know, I have to say my concern for my constituency really is on that urban core as well. I'm interested in the city of Binghamton, the city of Elmira is another example, who will have impacts, but it's not clear what they stand to gain financially from it.
Yeah, also I think the other thing is that we don't speak of frequently when we talk about this. Our focus has been on the Marcellus, but there's also the Utica Shale, so there's actually, which is deeper. But these regulations, my understanding is, will apply going forward in perpetuity unless they're changed. But it's not just the Marcellus, right? It's larger than that.
Definitely.
It is.
It would also apply to the Utica Shale, and that covers a much larger portion of New York State than just this Marcellus, and a lot more people will be impacted. An interesting fact in that recent poll, which showed that the majority of upstaters were opposed to this process, 47% in fact to 41, I believe it was, really was an eye-opener for me personally. You know, more men were for it, of course, than women. But I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I assumed all along that people in upstate would be all for it, but because they're closer to it, perhaps they have more reservation about it.
Now, what caused this delay, my understanding, is that you, the advisory panel, has asked for a lot of information that's not available yet. The agencies are not able to tell you what you're asking for. Is that right? So what are you asking for specifically?
Well, DEC was certainly prepared to tell us about staffing needs and resource needs, training and equipment they need to purchase. But also, it's very clear we need the Department of Health, Public Service Commission,
Right.
Ag and Markets, and all the rest of them to do the same. And I don't think they were really prepared just quite yet to know not only what they would need, but how they would relate to the other agencies. We're not just in various silos. We have to work cooperatively, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel or duplicate efforts in the process. So there's a lot of sorting out to be done. Really, the bottom line is we're watching in Pennsylvania sort of a laboratory of how things go when you work backwards.
Yeah.
And
trying to fix it ex post facto. Yeah.
Right. And each day we learn a new thing that they should have thought about ahead of time. And that's what's in effect delaying things for us.
As an environmentalist, has this process changed things for you personally, as your view of this, as you came in feeling, as you said, highly skeptical, and now as you're getting the information, has that changed for you?
Nothing's going to make me fully comfortable with this scale of industrial activity. I moved upstate in order to enjoy a certain lifestyle, and it's taken me a long time to try to come to terms with what this could possibly mean for some of my neighbors, some of the municipalities, local governments, revenues, school districts. I really had to stretch in order to try to be open-minded, and I've done that as well as I possibly can. People have been criticized me about it, but I feel an obligation to be a solid, calm voice in the middle of this very contentious topic.
Criticize you how? They think you should be an advocate out there being like, no, 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 no?
Well, some people think it's moving too slow, some
Right.
people think it's moving too fast.
Right.
But for the most part, I feel that it's moving along just fine, because the right people, I think, right now are at the table asking the correct questions, whether it regarding floodplain or downtown municipalities, or all of the host of resources that will be needed. I think we're on the right track. People will look to New York when all is said and done. If this can be done safely, they will say New York took the time to get it right.
Speaking of floodplains, which is a nice segue, so I thank you for that, you had a huge, I mean, we saw you standing outside of a shelter. You had a huge flood impact in your community, in your district. What's the latest update that you can provide us on that?
There's some good news, but honestly, it is a long, long haul for us to get back on our feet. We still have some 5,000 residents right in our immediate area that are displaced from their homes. A couple of thousand homes still have no electricity or gas. We've got lots of problems with moving forward. We've gotten 2 nursing homes that were destroyed and 2 elementary schools. So just the ripple effect from those 2 systems alone has caused a lot of problems. Food banks in particular.
Is everyone out of the shelter now? That's now a thing of the past. You did have a piece of legislation that, I think I'm getting this right, that would exempt some districts from the 2% property tax cap if they were dealing with flood. Is that right?
Well, close. What,
I tried. I knew it was somewhere in that neighborhood.
The property tax cap is very strict, and it will not allow school districts to exempt costs associated with responding to natural disasters. And for my district, there's the Binghamton City School District, where MacArthur School was virtually destroyed, probably will have to be demolished. And they have, overtime costs, cleanup costs, and Wi-Fi expenses for a new school that they've rented, and rental expenses. But honestly, my taxpayers are saying we really can't afford another dime, which is why they supported the 2% in the first place. So I'm hoping that perhaps we can get them support in the state budget for those needs. But down the road, most property tax caps in other states do exclude natural disaster expenses, and I think it's only reasonable that we take a look at that at some point.
Well, it is going to be an interesting year with a whole new set of issues related to the old issues, but
Yes.
Sort of a new template, if you will.
Yes,
I want to
indeed.
thank you for spending time with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks.